All right, everybody. Looks like we're live here. Thank you for everyone participating. We're really excited about our event today. Brad, Kaaren, thank you so much for attending. And I know we have a couple of people that are still coming in, and so I'm going to go ahead and let them come in. Usually takes about 15, 20 seconds. And so, but in the meantime, it's great to see everyone, and thank you so much for your time and your participation. We do have a good group of people that signed up for today's event, and we're really excited for all the information that you're going to be providing us. And so let me just go ahead and get started as people are walking in. All right, so regarding CCIM, okay, our mission statement is to elevate our members to the highest levels of success in the commercial real estate profession as we potentially can. We do that through education. We also do that through networking. And so those are the two pillars that we really focus on in SoCal CCIM, is to make sure people have the tools that they need, that get out there and be successful for themselves and for their clients. And at the same time, we want to make sure everyone gets an opportunity to meet the people, learn more about each other's business, and help grow each other's business. And so want to encourage everyone to follow us on the social media sites that we have. We have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, along with YouTube. And so if anyone's looking for a copy of this presentation today, go to our SoCal CCIM YouTube channel, which is where you'll find a copy of this presentation along with other presentations that we've done in the past. Just also want to give a quick announcement to our board of directors and give them a big thank you and a shout out. There's no way we could do the things that we do without the board of directors that we have. Our amazing president, Eric Frickel, Bonnie Brown, Brian Russell, Justin Hugron, myself, Willie Hugron, Dino Champagne, Greg Deal, along with the Tone Ayub. Again, thank you so much for everything you do, and your generosity is really helping us, our chapter, go in the direction that we all needed to, especially in the times that we've been in. Also want to give recognition to our sponsors, CoStar, LoopNet, Allied Commercial Real Estate, 1031 Crowdfunding, Asset Preservation, Ashwell Associates, Baker Law Group, and Syntax and Platinum Law Group. And again, there's no way we could do the things that we do at the prices that we do without our sponsors. And again, so I want to give a big thank you to our sponsors. They're all open for business, and we all want to get out there and support our sponsors just as they've been supporting us here at SoCal CCIM. And so with that, I'd like to also introduce our amazing president, Eric Frickel. Eric.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our Lunch and Learn today. And thank you, Gary, for handling the MC duties and doing such a great job at that as always. And I'd like to thank our presenters today, Kaaren Hall, and I'm sorry, I think you said your name was switched up, right?
Yes, Brad Barth.
Brad Barth. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for being here today, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah, we're very excited. And Eric, and thank you for everything you do. You're doing an amazing job, and thank you for your leadership.
Thanks.
All righty. So with that, a little bit more information about SoCal CCIM. These are some of the member benefits that we have. Again, we talked about networking, we talked about education. We have some technologies that we have tools available for us to help do our jobs better for our clients. And so we have over 120 members. We have plenty of events throughout the year, and want to encourage everyone to participate and join as a member. If anyone has any questions, please reach out to myself or Eric or to our chapter administrator, Gail Stewart. And so we'll be glad to help you and help you along with the process. And so with that, why don't we go ahead and get into our presentations today. We have two amazing presenters and amazing information that we'll be providing today. And so I just want to give a little quick information to our participants. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and use the Q&A box. We want to make sure that we make this as interactive as possible, and we want to make sure that we answer all the questions as well. And so again, if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A and we'll go ahead and address them. After each presenter speaks, then we'll address the questions that are specific for them. Then we'll bring them both back and go ahead and answer any questions that we have from there. But from there, why don't we do some self-introductions, and Kaaren, why don't you go ahead and take it away. Let me stop sharing here, and the floor is yours.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. And thank you for asking me to join you today. I'm really excited to talk about self-directed IRAs. I'm sure it's a topic that a lot of the people here today are familiar with, but if you're not, we're going to talk about what's new and how, how these great tools can be used. I think one of the best ways that the tool can be used is, of course, in raising capital. So we'll get to that. But my background is, in real estate largely. I was, I was a real estate agent long ago, and then I got into property management, commercial properties in Seattle. So I managed several large apartment buildings in Seattle, some on the lake. It was really fun. And then got into mortgage loan servicing for a very long time, and loan origination and so forth, and got into the self-directed IRA space. So that is a bit of my background. I've founded UDirect IRA Services in 2009, and so we are now sitting on about 600 million of assets under management, and thousands of clients. And so we have helped people to take their money from where it is, their retirement money, and move it into a self-directed IRA vehicle, or it could be an IRA or 401k or a different kind of account. But then to go on to invest in alternative assets like real estate and private placements, notes, raw land, all sorts of different asset classes. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Now we are administrative, we're not advisory. So I'm always referring people to, Barth Calderon, to their law firm, if you need legal advice. And also if you need tax advice, you need to speak to a competent tax professional, because that's not the sort of service that we do provide. But let's talk about what it is that UDirect actually does. We help you save for retirement, and we help your investors to save for retirement. A huge deficit between what Americans have and what we need to actually retire. If somebody had $100,000 in their retirement account, that may seem like a lot of money to them, but if you were going to retire at 59 and a half and live until you're 86 and a half, you're going to have less than $400 to live on. And that's certainly, that's gas money in Southern California. So we all need to save for retirement by investing wisely. And so self-directed IRAs are a tool to do this and accomplish this. So when we talk about the total amount of retirement funds in the United States, now, Brad, this has changed a lot since you and I talked last, but it's something like $35 trillion in American retirement. A lot of that is in IRAs, and that's because people have changed jobs. And a lot of times when they do, they'll move their previous employer plan into an IRA. Now, the self-directed IRA space is growing every day, but we're still represent maybe 4% of the total. So if you're raising capital, this is a great pool from which to raise capital. If you've got a private placement or something like that, you probably know the rules, and IRAs are the place to tap. In fact, private placements are the #1 asset class for self-directed IRAs as a whole. So again, gigantic pool of capital. But a lot of people haven't heard about it, and a lot of CPAs and attorneys have not heard about self-directed IRAs. So if you haven't heard about it, you're not new, or you don't have to feel like you've been in the weeds or anything. These rules, though, they were created in 1975, but those are the ERISA laws. That's when Gerald Ford signed the ERISA laws into effect, and IRAs were created. So they've always been self-directable. A self-directed IRA isn't a different, an IRA is an IRA. It's a bucket that holds assets with certain rules surrounding that. Whether it's self-directed or not, that simply refers to what kinds of assets those retirement buckets can hold. So self-directed IRAs let you hold a lot of different asset classes, not just stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. So contributing to retirement accounts is a great thing for everybody, especially those who are trying to grow their savings and be ready for later. And the making contributions, it varies. Every single kind of account type has slightly different rules. The traditional Roth, SEP, simple, solo K, inherited account, well, you don't contribute to an inherited IRA, but each one of these has contribution rules based upon your age and maybe even your account type, of course, and your income. So we can go into that deeper at another point. But what is the difference between a typical IRA? You've got one at Schwab, you've got one at TD or something. And what's the difference between that and what we do here? Well, again, the difference is just the asset class. The IRA, it's the same rules. And if you are a rule book person, you can look them up on the IRS's website. That's irs.gov, and it's publication 590. 590A and B. The rules are the same for all IRAs, but the self-directed IRA lets you then invest in alternative assets, even precious metals, you know, tax liens, raw land, rental property, performing and non-performing debt. All these different kinds of asset classes can be held within the self-directed IRA, where they can't be held elsewhere. So the limits, when the IRS came out with IRAs, they said, hey, look, you can take these accounts and you can invest in anything except life insurance contracts and collectibles. That hasn't changed. However, every custodian may have their own limits where they will say what assets they will and won't custody. That's called, they'll say it's administratively feasible. So whatever is administratively feasible for that custodian, they will hold. Like, for example, racehorses. A racehorse is an asset, but it's not an asset class that we will custody for. One good example. So here's Pub 590, a little bit about it. It talks about IRAs and what you can and can't do. So you don't use the IRA to borrow money for personal use. You can borrow money from a 401k, but not an IRA. You don't sell anything you own personally to your IRA or to your retirement account. That's called a prohibited transaction. It's not security for a loan, and you don't use this retirement account to invest for any kind of personal use at all. No personal use, present or future. But really special rules exist when you're investing with self-directed IRAs that I don't think exist anywhere else. If they do, let me know. I'd love to know. But some people are disqualified from the IRA, and I'll explain what that means. Some people are qualified, some are disqualified. So the disqualified people are your lineal ascendants and descendants, your parents and grandparents, you and your spouse, your children, your grandchildren, and their spouses disqualified to the IRA. So it's not like investing with cash. You have to be careful about who you're investing with and who's benefiting. The people who are qualified are the people out to the sides on the family tree, like your aunts and uncles, your brothers and sisters, your nieces and nephews. So whenever you're investing, you have to keep things arm's length. For example, you would not have your IRA purchase a property, but then have your father be the listing agent. Then that would be a disallowed person offering services to the plan. You can go deep on the prohibited transaction rules in the Internal Revenue Code if you like. It's IRC, Internal Revenue Code 4975. So IRC 4975 really breaks out the prohibited transaction rules in great detail. But you just want to keep things arm's length is really the rule. And if you've got a deal that you're looking at and you've got a question, we're happy to answer. If you are the sponsor, say, of like a Reg D offering, and you want to know, hey, can I invest my IRA into my own Reg D offering? The answer is no, because it's not arm's length enough and because you're offering services to the plan, so it would be prohibited. That's an example. So we talk about self-directed IRAs, but that's an umbrella term really, and it's an umbrella covering all these different kinds of accounts. An individual K, a solo K, is very popular for self-employed people who have no full-time employees in any of the companies they own. It's got a lot of bells and whistles. It's got large contribution limits and other things. Like you can, for example, have a very large Roth bucket in an individual K, regardless of your income. But the self-directed term does refer to all these different kinds of plans. So how do you do it? You know, early on, when I was working for another self-directed IRA company, when I was first getting started, I thought I've got to make this easy for myself. I've got to make this easy for my clients and customers to understand. So I thought, well, look, it's a 3-step process: open, fund, invest, right? Open an account, takes about a day, fund it by moving money into it. Now, I'll tell you what, during COVID, that funding time is taking longer when you're moving money from other custodians. So that time limit has extended from maybe 3 days to maybe a week. It has definitely grown during the COVID period. And once your account is open and funded, then you invest. You give us the supporting documentation, which would be the contract, whatever it may be, maybe the PPM and the subdocs, that sort of thing, or a offer to purchase or a note. We review it, and assuming everything's great, we fund it. And then 100% of the proceeds that are due to the IRA come back to the self-directed IRA that owns the asset. It doesn't go anywhere else. It goes to the IRA that owns the asset. It really must. Otherwise, it's prohibited, right? And if the asset in the IRA requires any expenses, then those expenses must be paid for by the IRA. So it's always a good idea to leave a reserve in your self-directed IRA. So I've gone through a lot of concepts very quickly. I'm certainly open to questions, whether they're here or whether you email me, khall at the letter U, udirectira.com. Happy to take any questions that you have regarding how to use this really powerful tool. Thanks, Gary.
Kaaren, that was amazing, wonderful information, and it's always good to hear what the self-directed IRA could actually do for folks. I have a question, and again, if anyone has any questions, go ahead and throw it in your Q&A box. And so here's probably a common question that probably comes up. So say there is an opportunity where someone who looking to do a self-directed IRA finds a property, doesn't have enough money in that IRA, right? But has enough money in their personal account, right? Can they buy the property under, IRA along a personal account, or how does something like that work?
Well, okay, you're not allowed to have any personal benefits. So if you're going to co-invest, you're going to have personal benefits. So you're going to have to answer the IRS on that. There was a ruling, a DOL 2000-10, that kind of laid out the rules by which you could invest with yourself. I wouldn't touch it because I couldn't prove that I didn't benefit from my IRA. But normally, no, you do not invest together with your self-directed IRA because of the risk of prohibited transactions. But if you don't have enough money in your IRA and you want to take down a deal, then find a partner, find someone else to go in on it with you. Or you could take on debt. You could take on a non-recourse loan. And by the way, it's not a loan to you, it's a loan to the retirement account. So the retirement account owes the debt. Being non-recourse, if the IRA doesn't pay back that debt, then the lender can come against the subject property, but not against any other assets that your IRA owns and not against you personally. However, there's a catch. If your IRA does take on debt, your IRA or the proceeds earned because of debt will be subject to a tax called UDFI, Unrelated Debt Financed Income Tax. You can read about it at irs.gov, publication 598, if you want to look up the rules there, or talk to your tax advisor. So the IRA can borrow money, has to be a non-recourse loan, and the proceeds earned because of leverage are taxable. So that is really good to know.
Wonderful. And we have a question here from Robert. His question is, can you use self-directed IRA with seller carryback?
You can, but the seller carryback is a loan, isn't it? So it would have to be non-recourse, and it would be, and then that loan would be, would throw off the UDFI tax.
Wonderful. Well, Kaaren, no. Well, thank you so much. And again, if anyone else has any questions, we're going to bring Kaaren back up after Brad's presentation. And so again, if you have any questions, something that comes up, please go ahead and ask. We're here for you, so please go ahead and utilize this time. So Kaaren, again, thank you so much for the wonderful information. And so, all right, Brad, I got to tell you, I've known you for quite some time, and every time I see you, I smile. A lot of good times together, and it's really good to see you on here, Brad. And again, thank you for your time.
Right, thanks, Gary.
Why don't you go ahead and take it away, Brad?
Great, thank you. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. Let me get my presentation rolling here. Make sure that works. Okay, great. All right, so first of all, for those of you, Kaaren Hall and I go back also a good 10 or 15 years, and I've had the privilege of working with her company, UDirect IRA Services LLC. Just a fantastic organization. Kaaren is extremely user-friendly, and I think in the financial world, and especially in our world that we deal with clients on the front line, she's actually very, very accessible, and her team is fantastic. And I do agree that investing in what you know best, Kaaren, as you always say. And I'm really glad to see you again, and I enjoyed your presentation very much. All right, so handing it over, and this is some of the areas where Kaaren and I dovetail, and because one of the things that Kaaren mentioned is investing in real estate, and that's how you hear things on the radio like how to invest in real estate, how to invest in gold bullion, all these different things. I think Kaaren and I, we worked on someone that had like Super Bowl tickets and hockey tickets for the Olympics many years ago. It's really allowing you the flexibility to invest in what you know best, but at the same time, just like with any other kind of investment, there are degrees of risks and liabilities associated with it. And what we always say that of my client's portfolio, one of the largest risk assets is their real estate. And so there's a big dovetail between how IRAs work as far as self-directing it for real estate and how an IRA LLC works. That's where you kind of add in the asset protection component as well as the limited liability component within that self-directed IRA environment. And that's really where Kaaren and I have crossed over over the decades. So I would say, Kaaren, those opening pictures of us, just they keep on looking. The older we get, the better those pictures look. All right. So here we have real estate risks and how to avoid them. And I know that part of the topic was Prop 19. I had also heard from Gary's opening comments that there were some 1031 exchange, perhaps accommodators or people involved in that. So before I kind of dive into my subject matter, I want to at least address these two items because they're both extremely timely, and I think there's a lot of misconception in some of these areas. So let's first talk about Prop 19. Prop 19, and in case you aren't aware, went into effect on February 16 of this year. So when you're asked to speak about Prop 19, I almost question myself, well, why am I talking about a law that already passed? So let me explain to you what the situation was pre-Prop 19, where we're holding now post-Prop 19, and what may be the light at the end of the tunnel. So prior to Prop 19, we were all under the guise of Prop 13, which was wonderful. It basically allowed our property tax base to be based upon the appraised value at the time of purchase, when there was a change of ownership at time of purchase. So you can have a piece of property that you acquired, let's say 40 years ago for, I don't know, $35,000, $40,000, $50,000 that has now an appreciable value of, let's say, $1 million. You're not paying your property tax based on the $1 million fair market value. You're paying your property tax based upon that $35,000, $45,000 purchase price and a small little incremental adjustment over time. So that's great. And one of the very nice things about that, and there's exclusions to property reassessments, is a parent-child transfer. And this is kind of where Prop 19 came in. So parent-child transfers happen in various ways. One, we have a sale. There may be a sale. I think someone had a question about a seller carryback. Maybe a parent wants to sell a child a piece of property. Maybe it's just gifting. Maybe it's part of an estate plan or gifting, or here's a wedding present. Here's a piece of property for you, just straight up gifting. And then you also have inheritances. People pass away. The other hat I wear besides an asset protection attorney is an advanced estate planning attorney. We do a lot of transfers that happen by way of inheritance through trusts or otherwise. And one of the beautiful things about Prop 13 was on primary residences, your principal primary residence, it didn't matter what the value was at time of passing or gifting or transfer. The donee, the kids, so long as they were parent-child and so long as the property in question was the principal residence, they took mom and dad's property tax basis. So the example I gave earlier, mom and dad, they bought the property for $50,000 and they're paying tax on that $50,000 with $500 a year, indexed over time at 1%. Now the property's worth $1 million. And if you were to transfer it at the fair market value, it would be now a $10,000 property tax bill. But so long it was the principal residence and so long it was a parent-child, the children took mom and dad's property tax basis, that $50,000 at that $500 per year. So you can see how if the property is worth $10 million, $25 million, it didn't matter. It was an exempt transfer between parent and child. That was for primary residences. Okay, great. There was also another one, which is very relevant to all of us who are in the commercial world. The commercial world said that, okay, for all other non-primary residential property, we're going to give you $1 million lifetime per owner exemption. So typically it's mom and dad own the property. Mom has $1 million exemption. Dad has $1 million exemption. So now when the property transfers from parent to child, again, estate, transfer, gift, parent to child, the $2 million, assuming mom and dad, or $1 million of the assessed value, remember the assessed, not the fair market value, the assessed value can transfer to the kids. Anything above that exemption, whether it's a $1 million exemption or a $2 million exemption, was subject to reassessment. So you basically were given $1 million per person exemption from reassessment off the original assessed value. Everything above that was subject to a reassessment. I always say, listen, $2 million for my clients, not a lot, but hey, I'm not gonna deny any type of tax exemption that we can get. So in the trust and estates arena, not only are we dealing with transfers of mom and dad's primary residence, we're dealing with all of their real estate portfolios, their commercial buildings, their business properties, you name it. And Prop 13 has reared its head many, many times over. It certainly has saved us for primary residences, and then it has caused some confusion for those other assets above the $2 million assessed value exemption. Okay, that's where we were holding. And it was great, and it was familiar, and we kind of worked around that. So Prop 19 came around, and I've been calling this, and I'm sorry if it's a little rough for some of you, I've been calling it rat poison. Because rat poison is a little bit of good food to attract the rats, but the consequence of the rats eating the rat poison is they die. So not a good outcome in the long run. And Prop 19 was sold, in my opinion, as rat poison. What was the good part of Prop 19? Sure, you can transfer, you can port your county-based property tax basis to any other county within California, so long as you're over the age of 55 or you are a survivor of a victim of fires or some other natural disaster. And you could do that, I believe it was up to 3 times. That's great. Everyone should have that. As residents of California, we should be able to move our properties, our counties to county, to follow our children and grandchildren, or just move to that lakefront property we've always dreamed of, and we should be able to carry our tax basis. That's great. Everyone loved that. Everyone said yes. But what did they not pay attention to? They paid attention to, and now we're going to eliminate your Prop 13 exemptions. So what happens to our unlimited exemption for our personal residences from parent-child transfers? Gone. So now you have a $1 million little adjustment for primary residence, so long as your kids occupy that property as their primary residence. How often does that happen? Because kids want to rent the property out or otherwise. And for all of you online regarding the commercial property, my $2 million exemption, like I said, not a lot, but I'll take it, completely gone. So now when you transfer property between parent and child, again, gift, devise, bequest, transfer, any commercial property, it is now 100% reassessable at time of transfer. And this it was voted in, I think it was late last year, and became effective on February 16. So here we are on April 8, which is today. So for those of you who didn't take advantage of transferring the assets through trust or otherwise prior to the effective date of February 16, you're now stuck with these properties that if you wanted to give to your kids, they're going to be subject to the new property tax basis. Government loves it because you created an entire new property source of property taxes. So that's the problem. And also, just as a quick little comment, remember, I'm talking about parent-child transfers. I'm not talking about parent to grandchildren. So it's not grandma and grandpa to the grandkids. If you're skipping a generation and you have a living parent in there, that would automatically trigger a reassessment. There's no sibling stuff either, because we deal with this all the time in the estates area. The kids inherit property and they're trying to horse trade amongst themselves, but they forget to take into consideration the bump in property taxes. So the additional, what I'm calling salt in the wound, is that you have some jurisdictions, many of you online may be subject to it, which are subject to rent controls. So now how do you transfer a property, or even there is an actual transfer to the kids, and the kids say, you know what, fine, I still want the property. It's been a legacy property. It's a good income producing property. And the situation we have now is that now the property can't produce enough income to pay the tax basis that got reassessed now because of the rent control issues. That's a major problem. There's also another issue that we dealt with in the estate planning arena. For any of you who are familiar with a tool called a qualified personal residence trust, a CUPR, there's a deferred gift built in there. And those deferred gifts, I'm not going to get into details, but for those of you who understand what I'm talking about, it could be a 10-year gift, it could be a 15 deferred gift, a 20, 25-year deferred gift. When that termination date, you survive that termination date, there's an automatic transfer by operation of law per the CUPR document that now goes to your kids. Well, guess what? You're still alive. And typically you still want to occupy the property. So now your property tax basis goes from our $50,000 mark up to our $5 million mark. You get hit with a reassessment. You're still alive. You ain't got the money to pay for the reassessment. So this Prop 19 thing was just awful. And I don't think anybody really quite knew what they were signing on to. As I said, it's rat poison. They were looking at the shiny object, the good part, and they completely disregarded the negative components. So there are some things that we're able to do. It's a little creative, and it's just, this is a completely emerging area. So what I tell you something today, it could be very different next month, but there are different tools and techniques that we are doing as far as partial transfers, not to trip up a reassessment. Some of you may be familiar with the Board of Equalization forms, what are called BOE 100B forms, Board of Equalization 100B forms. And that's transfers of property, transfers of entities. Typically it's limited partnerships or LLCs, where you can transfer up to 50% of ownership and not more than management. And that would not trigger a reassessment. So you have an entity, you can transfer up to 50%, and that entity owns real estate itself, and that would not subject a reassessment. That's one way that we're working around some of the Prop 13, these Prop 19 issues, and that still kind of needs to be thought out through a more comprehensive analysis. It works in some circumstances, not in all circumstances. And then the big question that comes up is the constitutionality of Prop 19. Is it even constitutional? There's been some discussion, at least in among us that are kind of really into this, that there's a rules in California, I believe, that I'm not a proposition attorney, but I believe that the California Constitution says regarding propositions, only one issue per proposition. And so here we actually had two issues on Prop 19. Issue number one, portability of property tax basis amongst different counties. Great. Property issue number two, wiping out Prop 13. Okay, that to me sounds like two issues. So we're going to wait and see. Someone is going to get nailed on this when people become conscious of what happened. Someone's going to take this up to the California Supreme Court. And then we're actually going to find out what's the true consequence and what's the spectrum of effect of Prop 19. Now, I read about a week or two ago that even the California legislature themselves are trying to get a grasp on this and to giving us some parameters, like kind of like regulation rulings on how do we deal with this. So it's something that we all want to kind of pay attention to, and it's worth paying attention to because it affects all of you guys that are commercial folks. Now, that's the Prop 19 issue. The next thing I want you guys to be aware of before I kind of get into my liability discussion has to do with 1031 exchanges. And this has to do with the new Biden rules that are being proposed. And this has to do with the Biden platform as I last read it. I've been kind of consumed now with the Bernie Sanders estate tax and gift tax rules that's taking place that could come into effect as of January 1st, 2022. Which is a huge issue in and of itself. We're all taking about a 70% or so haircut on our state exemptions. And if you all have commercial property, you probably have more than $3 million of net estates, equities, and otherwise. And we want to try to lock in our $11.7 million exemption that we'd enjoyed under the Trump administration. And then a $23.4 million if you're married. All that's going to go away, dropping it down to a $3.5 million exemption under the Bernie Sanders rule that's going to be adopted by Congress, most likely. And then they're going to be increasing a staggered tax basis above that $3.5 million, starting at 45%, 50, 55, and then up to 65% taxes thereafter. So that's been consuming us. But one of the other things that was inside his tax proposal during his election campaign, which I believe is still the case, he said that anyone that earns more than $400,000 cannot qualify for a 1031 exchange. So let that kind of sink in. He says if anyone that makes more than $400,000, I believe when he was campaigning, it was any individual who made more than $400,000, 1031 exchanges will be deemed as ordinary income and you cannot defer that capital gain. I believe recently I was watching the news and all of a sudden 400,000 per individual became 400,000 per household. So I don't know what the rules are there. For those of you that are concerned about it, I suggest you do a little bit of Google research and try to find out. Like I said, that this is just my present understanding that the $400,000 per individual got reduced to a per household. Either way, that was the threshold that once you reach that $400,000 mark, 1031 exchanges are kind of off the option available list to those of us who invest in real estate. Again, I'm not sure what the current status is on that, but that's my understanding. So it's worth taking a look at. So that's kind of my little opening comments on this. And I believe in probably the 15 minutes or so that I have remaining, I'm going to go really quickly through real estate risks and how do we minimize them. And I don't think a lot of this is going to be surprising to a lot of you. The tools that we use to limit the liability to us as landlords, and also how do we protect our assets from the claims of third-party creditors. So that's kind of what my part is more about. So we'll kind of skip through this really quickly. It's important that we do start off with what a definition of asset protection is. I believe there's a lot of misconceptions and about what it is. And basically, I just kind of like my little bottom line here I have in red, that the more barriers between assets and liabilities, the greater the leverage. That's an important word. The greater the leverage to negotiate a fast and favorable settlement with your creditors. So asset protection is not about sticking your stuff off in some faraway island and then being completely reckless and being completely secretive about what you got. That's not the case. Actually, asset protection is about full disclosure. If you want to come and get my assets, then this is what you're going to have to deal with. I like to tell people that, can you take the hill? The answer is yes, but at what cost? And so it's all about leverage. It's about making your assets so unattractive, so difficult, so inconvenient, and so expensive to go after that you're in much better position to negotiate a settlement than they are for someone to continue to pursue this. And also put it within the framework in which we are operating. Understand, and I'm a big talk radio guy, and I like to listen to the local one down here in Southern California is KFI. I listen to KFI, and all during, of course, the traffic hours, all you hear about are accident lawyers, accident lawyer dot this, accident lawyer dot that, and all they talk about, we have collected $800 million in settlement. We have $400 million in settlement. We have $1 billion in settlement. Great. No one's advertising how many cases they won. What they're doing is they're advertising how much they've collected for their clients in settlement. So realize that 98%, let's just say, don't quote me on the statistic, let's just say a substantial majority of lawsuits end in settlement. And if that's the case, let's manipulate that litigation playing field that puts you in the most favorable settlement position available, so you don't become the low-hanging fruit. Let them go settle with somebody else's assets, not your assets. And that's kind of what asset protection is all about. It's about changing and making it more difficult, not impossible. And it's not that you don't pay. And it's not about secrecy. It's about making it more difficult and inconvenient, that you're in a better position to negotiate a fast and favorable settlement with your creditors. Real estate risks, we all know them: slip and falls, fires, habitability issues. Dog bites are great. I get a lot more than those I ever would have thought. Electrocutions, lead or other hazardous materials on the land. These are all issues in our very tenant-friendly environment of here in California. So you just have to be aware of these and stuff that they just make up. You know, y'all, I think one of the good ones is mold, right? That the mold is a new one. The new kid on the block is mold. So never heard about mold a couple of years ago. Someone came up with mold, and now it's all over the place. So now the new one also is COVID-19, right? That's a great one, right? You live in a multi-unit place. You're the landlord. What's your cleaning protocols? Why'd you let these people next door have a party? I got sick. They got sick. I'm going to sue the landlord because you didn't have proper COVID-19. I'm calling it the COVID-19 boogeyman, because nobody knows exactly what the primary source is. They're just going to point to the guy or gal with the biggest pockets to try to satisfy their claim. And we're expecting, that is at Barth Calderon, because of what we do, are expecting a tsunami, not a tidal wave, but a tsunami of litigation that's going to come up through this COVID-19. So for all of our clients that are involved in landlords, you want to make sure you have some planning in place before you get whacked with the boogeyman too. Just a quick little note here. This is where we have a little bit of crossovers on estate planning. And this is for those of us who own property in joint tenancy. There are some real legal risks and considerations when you have a joint tenancy. Not only do you have what I call unintended disinheritances because of a right of survivorship, see this all the time. But one of the other things that you have from a liability point of view is that you have 100% liability for all the activities of your co-owners. So if you happen to be in a joint tenancy with mom or dad or sisters or brothers or business partners, friends and countrymen, then you know what, then that maybe you're responsible, but maybe somebody else isn't. And because you're all in kind of a ownership partnership arrangement, you're what's called joint and several liability. Because of the joint tenancy rules, you could be 100% liable for the acts of a joint owner. You also could completely lose your property because of the acts of a joint owner. So you have also complete liability as a result of those individuals. And so here, not only do we run across unintended disinheritances in the estate planning world, we also have, it's also bad from an asset protection point of view. It really should be in some form of entity. It should be in an LLC, for example, because now you have limitations. If you want survivorship built in, or you don't want unintended disinheritance, the LLC operating agreement can kind of account for those buyout provisions or the inheritable provisions of that membership interest, and also can minimize control and management, and thereby limiting some of the other individuals' liabilities for the acts of the manager or other people where you'd get blindsided by not knowing what they're doing. So again, if you're aware, if you have joint tenancy, I recommend you go back and speak with your tax counsel, your legal counsel. Probably not the most appropriate way to hold property, especially in a commercial setting. And I always got to make sure I talk about this. Revocable living trusts offer no asset protection. I talk about this, I put the word no in red, because every time I give a talk about estate planning or asset protection planning, someone inevitably will come back and say, well, Brad, guess what? All of my assets are in my trust. I don't have to worry about any of this asset protection stuff. And I always like to run through a quick little exercise. And so that's very interesting. Let's talk about this for a second. The first thing I ask them is, who made the trust? They say, well, my wife and I, we made the trust. Okay, well, who are the trustees of that trust? Well, my wife and I, we're the trustees. Well, who are the beneficiaries of that trust? Well, you know what? It's my wife and I. Who has the power to revoke it, to modify it? Oh, no, my wife and I. That's right. And and so who has the power to put assets in it? Who has power to take assets out of it? My wife and I. So I kind of go through that and demonstrate to them that a regular estate planning trust, there's no difference, because you exercise so much dominion and control over those assets that you and your trust are one and the same. I sue you, I get the trust. I sue the trust, I get you. You're one in the same. As a matter of fact, you can think about it almost in reverse implication. You say to yourself, hey, if my trust was in fact an asset protection tool, why would any of you online here be paying for a corporation? Why would you be paying for an LLC? Why would you be paying for a limited partnership? Hey, just exercise it out of your trust. After all, it's a completely asset protected tool. So you can see that that's not the case. To limit the liability, you have the corporations, the LLCs, and the limited partnerships. The trust is a state distributionary tool. It is not an asset preservation tool. It helps to distribute assets. It helps to minimize expenses of probate. It helps to minimize, hopefully, internal fighting among the family by giving them some direction, but it is not an asset protection tool. Hence, we have to look to other things. Also, you got to worry about landlord liabilities. How do we protect ourselves from tenants? And I'm sure, again, all of you online here that deal with commercial are very, very familiar with this. Perhaps you're enjoying a lawsuit or two presently. So we always want to take a look at liability insurance policy. It's always the first thing that we point to. I get sued. Okay, Brad, I don't need all this fancy schmancy stuff. I have a very large liability insurance policy. Great. I always ask the question. I forget. I don't even ask them if you've read it, because I know the answer to that one. The answer is no. The question is, have you seen it? Yeah, I've seen it. Okay. Is it fair to say that it's about 30 to 50 pages? Yeah, it's fair to say that about 30, 50 pages. Is it fair to say that it's like dual column? Yeah, it's dual column. Small 6-point font. Yeah, it's 6-point font. And then page 1, paragraph 1 typically will say that you're covered for the following items, but then the remaining 39 pages are all the things that you're not covered for, they're exclusions. And so do yourself a favor, that if you're involved in commercial real estate or any auto policy, whatever you're doing, do yourself a favor and take a good look at your policies. Specifically, take a look and see what things are excluded. And if you're doing those things or things that could be interpreted as those, then you want to head and take a quick look and see what other options are available, either through getting a rider or an endorsement, or maybe even going to a different company that has a maybe a bit more expensive, but they have broader scope of coverages. Those are the exclusions. The next thing you have to worry about when it comes to insurances, and unfortunately I've dealt with this as well, is insufficiencies of coverages. So you come back and say, Brad, I got you on the insurance. I have $5 million. Beautiful. What happens when you have a $15 million liability, such as someone trimming the trees and coming down and becoming a quadriplegic, or there's a fire and 3 people pass away and you got a $12 million liability? Sure, the first $5 million is covered. That covers, but what about that deficiency? What about that $7 million or $10 million deficiency? Once the insurance money is gone, it's gone. You can't come back and say, hey, good faith, blah, blah, blah. They did their job. That remaining deficiency is on you. So now you want to make sure that you have a backup plan. And what is that backup plan? That liability was contained within an entity and is not being brought on to you personally. So again, you still need these entities for limited liability purposes as well. And it's no secret here, the tool that we use is an LLC. LLCs set up properly. Again, set up properly is a nice little condition here, is that they do offer internal liability. So you have a liability on property number one. You commingle a bunch of properties because, hey, it's expensive in California to have an LLC. It's $800 a year. So I'm going to put all of my $20 million of real estate comprising of 15 pieces of property inside one LLC. Okay, brilliant. Terrible business move. So you have a problem on property number one. You don't sue property number one. You sue the owner of property number one. And when you sue the owner of property number one, you're suing the LLC. And what else does the LLC own? It owns properties 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And that little Tasmanian devil will just keep on zipping around inside that LLC until their claim is satisfied. So although property one was the problem child, you lost 2, 3, 4, and 5 because you commingled them all inside one LLC. Sure, you didn't get any personal liability because the LLC saved you from that personal liability, but you lost your entire investment. So what we want to do is use multiple structures, a multiple entity approach. So now you have LLC number one, you have LLC number two, exact same scenario. LLC problem child number one is it's contained there and they cannot go after LLC number two. Now you have your asset protected. And now they're not all the same because some could be single family, some could be commercial, some could be high equity, some could be highly leveraged, some can be, I call it Irvine gated community, some can be slumlord stuff, right? Some different activities, different neighbors, Section 8, whatever the case may be. Guess what? You have different risk profiles, and we design the plans based upon the risk profiles, the equity, the amount of income. So this is all very important. And on top of that, these LLCs now set up correctly, not only are they protecting you from the tenants, but designed correctly, again, we also can create asset protection. So now we're not worried about the tenant suing you. We're worried about you getting in a car accident and someone taking your assets and trying to reach inside the LLCs to grab your property. After all, property is your assets. It's part of your stuff that we like to take away from you to satisfy our judgments. So if they're set up correctly, these also become fortresses where a creditor cannot penetrate to get inside. Again, set up correctly in proper jurisdictions, that works very well. So here you may have an example of a typical client, apartment holdings, Delaware, authorized in California, and then townhouse holdings, Nevada, authorized in California, just using some of our preferred jurisdictions. They're both inside California. They hold California dirt. You're managing it from California. It's a California business. You're not getting out from under the $800 for California. But doesn't mean that you have to use California as the governance of the entity. One of the benefits of being in a country of 50 states, we got 50 different sets of laws that we can choose to see which is best for you. And maybe it's Delaware, maybe it's Nevada, maybe it's Wyoming, maybe whatever. So we basically designed this as part of our structure. And of course, our most intimate of assets is our home. There's something recently came out that I think it was also effective 1/1/21. I'm not quite sure that the California Assembly or legislator knew what they were doing, because they actually did us a big favor. ordinarily California is all about wealth redistribution. We're all about taking from people and giving it to other people. And so, as you may have known, we had some of the lowest homestead exemptions in a state that had some of the highest property values. And one of the benefits of being a national speaker, I get to look at all the other states' homestead exemptions when I travel. What is a homestead? A homestead is basically the amount of money in equity that you get to keep regardless of what happens. You get into a lawsuit, you file for bankruptcy, there's a certain amount of your equity you get to keep. Historically, it was $75,000 for single, $100,000 for married, maybe $150,000 if you were over a certain age or had a disabled child or dependent there with you. And so here we had values in the millions, and you had a homestead exemption of $100,000. It's nothing relative to the value. So homestead exemption in California is basically meaningless. So along comes this new law effective 1/1/21, and they come along and say, now we're going to adjust the homestead exemption, a minimum floor of $300,000. That's unbelievable. It's a 300% increase. And then on top of that, they said that was the floor. The ceiling is $600,000. And how do we determine where you fall within this 300,000 or 600,000? That depends on the median sales price in the county. I think it was the month prior to the homestead election exemption that you're making a claim on. Some brand new rule on that, but that's awesome because the homestead is only the amount of equity. So if you have a house worth $1 million and you have a loan on it for $700,000, the amount of equity is only $300,000. And if you live in Irvine, where the average home price is like, I don't know, $2 million, $1.5 million, you're going to get the full $600,000 homestead. So your house, for all intents and purposes, is safe from the claims of creditors because of the new homestead exemption. So you want to take advantage of this. It's free. It's great. And like I said, I don't think the legislator in California truly knew what they were doing because this was a big thank you for us. Another option that we use are things that involve a blind trusts on privacy. So we use a trust coupled with an underlying limited liability company, an LLC. This is another way that gives you both privacy as well as asset protection, a very, very popular tool for a lot of our clients who want to get off the public radar, to kind of go incognito to the extent that we can, and especially the case when we have renters and high profile people. This is a situation, the way that I had to kind of bring this into the firm a handful of years ago. We have celebrity folks and business owners, and we have, just to give you the example, the guy comes to me and says he owns a collection business, and in 4 o'clock in the morning he gets this knock on his front door, and the deadbeat that he was collecting against puts a gun right in his face and says, "Stop collecting from me or I'll kill you and your family." He calls me the next morning and says, "Brad, what the heck was that all about? How did this guy know where I live?" I said, "Oh, that's very simple. Go with me onto the computer. You ready? Go to Google. Step 1, type in your address. Step 2, hit the enter key. Step 3, boom. Organically, all the information pops up with a picture of his front door. So he says, "We need to stop this." I said, "Yeah, it's probably a good idea." So we then use some privacy components. I have to worry about tenants. I don't want people knocking at my door at 3 in the morning telling me to fix the toilets. I don't even want my tenants knowing where I live, for crying out loud. So we want to design privacy around that. Again, to the extent that we can, we want to try to go off the radar, go incognito. I do a lot of privacy practice in the firm as well. Now with this new Biden rule, we're having to dust this guy off. This was that Cupid I just mentioned to you a few moments ago. We have to dust this one off because this was because Trump gave us such a high exemption of at least 11.7 million. A lot of people didn't have to worry about removing their home for estate tax purposes. But now with the Biden limiting us down, this is going to become another hot topic. It's wonderful not only for estate tax exemptions, but also wonderful for asset protection purposes. So basically, in conclusion, with what we do, and believe me, I got material that we can go on for 6 hours here. So can go in depth. So the point is you got to have a plan and you need to review it like anything else. We always take a look at our clients. We do basically a due diligence, a solvency analysis. What are your assets? What are the inherent vulnerabilities in those assets? What's the threat, right? Who's coming after your stuff? And as a result, then do we identify where your risks are and we focus in on the risks? So we put all of our clients some more comprehensive than others, depending upon what we're trying to accomplish, do some type of analysis, and then we put together a plan that ultimately allows you to sleep comfortably at night. All right. Then we all can live happily ever after. Right. So my name is Brad. I know it says Harry on my name up there. That's my father. I'm kind of stepping in. He got pulled away at the last minute. So Gary, thank you for allowing me to step in. And what we normally do, for those of you who have this little web thing on here, my partner, Paul Hitchcock, if any of you that want to speak with us, we always give everybody a 30 minutes of free time. You can talk to me directly, because I know it's a lot of information. I talked fast, it's complicated. And if you have an interest, you want to speak with me, you kind of dial into this website and you'll get into a self-calendaring system and you'll get directly on my calendar and we can touch base on that. Other than that, Gary, I'll hand it back over to you.
Brad, wow. Amazing information, very entertaining as well. I took a lot of notes here. A lot of the stuff applies to me, my family, and one thing I'll never forget is the COVID boogeyman.
Boogeyman.
The boogeyman. We do have a question for Kaaren. Kaaren. Typical administration fee for a self-directed IRA. What does that typically look like?
Well, our fee is a flat fee. It's $275 a year, regardless of the number of assets in the account and regardless of their value. So $50 setup fee, $275 a year. Wow. We ask that you leave not a fee, but just a $325 pad in the account.
Wow, amazing. That's a great deal. Thank you so much for that. And that's wonderful. And so, yeah, no, again, if anyone has any questions, again, we're here for you. We do have a couple of minutes. So if you have any questions, just come on in. And so Brad, I mean, I think there are so many questions, especially as we are getting into the new administration. And there's a lot of stuff that we just don't know yet, right? So as stuff continues to come on, maybe we got to bring you back on board and Kaaren back on board to give us an update as to where things are at.
Yeah, sure. I actually have a question for you, Kaaren.
Oh, sure.
I know that when we've done our talks together over the years, and we've always talked about being able to invest in things and we accept the life insurance and the collectibles. Where's cryptocurrency kind of falling within this new economy and IRA self-direction?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot to say about it. Is it like, in some ways it's personal property, and in other ways it's an investment. There's a lot of fraud in the space, especially with the ICOs, the initial coin offerings. There are issues about the storage and are the people who stored, are they insured? Do they have E&O in case somebody types in the wrong number into the little cryptocurrency device? So there are a lot of issues, but you can invest in cryptocurrency using a self-directed IRA through the LLC, and the LLC is the one that does the investing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow, that's fantastic. And so, well, you know what, I definitely want to thank each of you for your time. I mean, this was amazing, and I can't thank each of you enough. And again, Brad, it was just fantastic seeing you as always. You do such an amazing job. And so, Kaaren, thank you again so much for your time. Just looking at the time as well, I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. So with that, if anyone has any questions, please reach out to Brad, reach out to Kaaren. They would love to hear from you. You see here on the screen on how to get in touch with Brad. Just take a screenshot, or we'll give you some information on that as well. And so, so again, thank you so much. And regarding recording, if anyone wants a recording on this, again, as a reminder, go to SoCal CCIM YouTube channel, and you'll find a copy of this recording along with everything else that we've done. And so once again, Brad, Kaaren, thank you so much for your time. This was fantastic. This was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. So,
great. Okay. Great seeing you, Kaaren.
thank you too.
You too.
Take care. Nice meeting you, Eric. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All righty.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everybody.